The Old Testament reading this morning is from the prophet Isaiah chapter 35, verses 1 through 10. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it shall blossom abundantly, and rejoice with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it. The majesty of Carmel and Sharon, they shall see the glory of the Lord. The majesty of our God. Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, do not fear. Here is your God. He will come with vengeance, with terrible recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. The lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. For water shall break forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The haunt of jackals shall become a swamp, the grass shall become reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. The unclean shall not travel on it, but it shall be for God's people. No traveler, not even fool, shall go astray. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast come upon it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. This is the word of the Lord. The epistle reading this morning is from James chapter 5, verses 7 through 10. Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Beloved, do not grumble against one another, so that you may not be judged. See, the judge is standing at the doors. As an example of suffering and patience, beloved, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Gospel reading this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 11, verses 2 to 11. When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Jesus answered them, Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me. As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. What did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. Truly, I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. This is the word of the Lord. Thank you.
Oh my God. All these pages. My dear friends and family, last year, when we were trying to send our belongings to Florida, I was at a DMV attempting to get a document needed to send our car. I arrived around 10:30 in the morning, and there was a real long line. But I thought it was moving. There were 3 clerks working, and after 90 minutes, then there were down to 2. I thought maybe they are in the lunch break and someone else will substitute them. No. About 30 minutes after, guess what? One of the 2 clerks that were working left. I thought, oh. But that one clerk kept calling people. It was a slow line, but I was getting closer. And when you are close in a line and there's only 1 people working, you start counting the heads in front of you. Oh, well, how many there are? 5. I'm down to 5. Yeah, maybe I will do it. That one clerk resembles John the Baptist. No matter there were no one else, if everyone else left, she stood there working, doing what she was supposed to do. Indeed, she did. I was surprised and amazed. I would have gone and left too. Just keep that in your mind. That sometimes when you are the only one, the alone one, the one that is left, it's not because you're doing something bad. Maybe you're doing what you are called to do, no matter where everyone else is. But then, since we are humans, around 2:30, after 4 hours without a break for water, bathroom, that lonely clerk took her belongings, and guess what? She left. I thought she needed a break. I was amazed by how committed she was. And yes, someone else arrived after. Security. And guess what he announced? Not the good news. He announced at 2:30 p.m., no more people will be attended today. It was 3 p.m. People started complaining. Some were really loud. Others couldn't believe it. Others did an about face and left. I was one of those. Please, please, please. I am not telling you this story to start wondering about how Puerto Rico, blah, 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 blah. If you want to talk about that, we can do it after service. That's not the intended purpose of this sermon. The purpose of this illustration is to remind you that although we know Jesus is coming and that to him 21 centuries of waiting is like a second, to us still is 21 centuries of waiting. It's a lot of time that has passed. And James, in his letter, warns us to be what? Patient. I wish I could have been more patient in the line when I was in the DMV, and if it was only 4 hours. Yes, we have to wait, but we have to wait in patience. Therefore, the wait for Jesus, my dear friends and family, could resemble to my adventure in the DMV, the incredulity, the despair, the ire that I saw in the line, and that I even felt while waiting, and nothing happened. The one thing for sure that we have promised, though, is that it may be okay that no clerks will be coming to help me, but there's one that is going to be coming to save us. And that's a guarantee. And on that promise, we should all rely. If we go to the prophet Isaiah, the prophet emphasizes something different. He uses another illustration. He's saying, if the Lord is coming, then where are we living? What is this place that we are living called? What is this place? And Isaiah reminds people that even if the earth has been kind to you, we have to be aware that we are not going to remain here. There is something else. There is something else that is going to happen. And for that, Isaiah uses another illustration, the desert. Not desert, desert. You know how many times I have to practice that word this week. Waiting can be like being in the desert. My DMV experience is like a desert, or maybe like the Hades. According to the National Geographic website, deserts cover more than 1/5 of the earth's land, and they are found on every continent. A desert is a place that receives less than 10 inches of rain per year. Deserts are part of a wider class of regions called dry lands. These areas exist under a moisture deficit, which means they can frequently lose more moisture through evaporation than they receive from annual precipitation. And contrary to common belief, we may believe that deserts are hot. There are also cold deserts in the Arctic. And even there are mountainous deserts. And only about of all the deserts in the world, only 20% of those are covered by sand. That was surprising. in short, a desert is a place that can manage with few drops of water. Maybe you disagree, but also our world without God survives with a small amount of water. We say, no, last year in Tallahassee over 90 inches of rain fell. I'm not referring to that. Some of us and many of us in this world are dry inside. They are dry because they do not have or feel the presence of God in their lives. Maybe you disagree. But a desert is our world without God. Maybe you disagree, but humans without God are also deserts. And yes, last week we were stumps. Today we are deserts. We know, Luis, we know. Don't have to remind us again. What I'm trying to remind you is that the wait for Jesus and Him not arriving yet could dry people out. Don't we live in a society where values are less Christian? Don't we live in a world that seems to be dominated by the so-called 1%? Don't we live in a country with walls where children are in cages and not being able to receive not even a flu shot? Don't we live in a place where facts and reason are undervalued with caricatures and name-calling? Don't we live in a place where by just the way you look or sound, the police are called? Don't we live in a place where depending on who you are and what your last name is, you are not allowed to buy a home in X or Y neighborhood? Don't we live in a world where the Amazon burns, the glaciers melt, and human-made disasters are more frequent, basically the way of the day? And yet, people still believe some that the earth is still flat and not round. If that is not a desert or absence of God, then what is? And here we are, December 15, 2019, in our numbered X Advent, affirming that Jesus is coming. Can we be a little more optimistic? Can we be a little joyful? That is what we said last year, Luis. And the year before that, too. More than challenging you with facts or presenting the other side of the coin, I just want to share with you that you understand why we Christians are cold, are dry. I understand why, as Christians, we are conforming to Sunday worship and just being realistic. We live in a hostile desert. We live in a dry land. However, one thing that I do want to remind you is that Advent is not only about God's movement toward us. Advent is also us moving towards God. Advent is also about us walking and keep walking towards Him. Advent is about trusting that the pathway that has been carved for you will take you where you need to go. How, Luis? The road is steep and the odds are against us. Remember the data I just shared with you about the deserts? Did I say that it doesn't rain at all? No. I said that only 10 inches of water fall. I didn't get the paper I needed from the DMV the following day? Yes, I did. Remember two things, my brothers and sisters. Good things come to those who wait in the Lord, and that by definition in the desert, although less than 10 inches of water fall, water still falls in the desert. And here is a reminder. One thing that happens in the desert when it rains, flowers bloom. The hardest part of us is to remain vigilant with wet hearts and minds, but thirsty at the same time. That is the purpose of Advent, for us to remember that heavenly rains fall in our times, and although they do not fully heal or restore the world, our minds and souls, they are signs of a promise of something that is really, truly coming and will happen. That the feeling, the sensation we feel when we witness a miracle, the sensation that we feel when we remember the good moments of our lives, or when we count our blessings, or our examples of the drops of heavenly rain that have fallen in your life, in your way. All the miracles that we have witnessed during this year here in this church, all the prayers that have been answered while everyone was called to pray for someone or for something that was going on, and we, after a few weeks, we gathered together and said, Jesus, prayers were answered. Those are the drops of water that should sustain you, even if we know that we are living in a dry land. Those drops of heavenly rain also serve a purpose to remember that God has promised for a full time of restoration. And that's going to happen. So when we read and talk about blind ones seeing, deaf ones hearing, lame ones dancing, or silent ones speaking, it is not hyperbolic language or exaggeration. It's just how it is going to be. The blooming desert began with the nativity, with God fulfilling His promise and sending His Son. It was confirmed at a high price, the cross. But it's also ratified in the empty tomb. This is not an stationary celebration. This is not a season. It is the way that we all should be every day of our lives. And yes, my family, like in every highway, accidents are going to happen. Maybe a flat tire or severe traffic congestion like the 75 in Ocala. This may skew our view of the world, may be bringing unnecessary grief, skepticism, and tiring us. But remember that the holy highway is unlike any highway we've ever been before. And we are in our path to the holy way. Just as Jesus moved towards us, we move also towards Jesus. And it is a parade route of praise, even with the redeemed joyfully travel to our final destination. It is a safe road. You cannot get lost again. Once you have joined the procession to Zion, you are on the holy highway and no one will stop you. I agree not everyone will survive in the desert, but those that were able to get wet will last until Christ's return. May that be our promise. May we live sustained by the promise of Jesus. One final words. As you know, we will be out for the next couple of weeks. We just want to thank you for blessing our lives, and also want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.